free, pleasurable, and responsible relationships. No longer should anyone, irrespective of their gender identity and sexual orientation, be denied of their human rights. On the 20th anniversary of the International Conference on Population and Development's Programme of Action, we affirm that human rights, sustainable development, and gender justice can only be realized when a profound paradigm shift takes place. As it had 2 decades ago in Cairo, based on the principles of universality, indivisibility, equality, and non-discrimination, participation and empowerment, accountability and rule of law. Therefore, now more than ever, advancing a new global covenant between women and men that respect our differences while enhancing human rights and gender equality is essential. Our bodies are the manifestation of our human unity and diversity. This implies acknowledging that human rights related to sexuality and reproduction are at the center of women's human rights and empowerment. Well, these are also the pillars of women's political, social, and economic rights. Likewise, this means recognizing that many men and boys face the negative cost and are harmed by the ways our society have defined men's roles and power relations. Too many boys and young men experience various forms of stigma, discrimination and violence because their racial and ethnic origin, caste, socioeconomic status, age, sexual orientation and gender identity, or simple because they do not conform to the traditional patterns of being a man in their families and their communities. We hold these matters to be necessary and relevant for a true transformation of our society and are central to the sustainability of any development agenda. The United Nations Population Fund is fully committed to advance such a transformative agenda in close coordination with our partners and to promote the human rights of individuals in all their diversity, in all spheres of life, particularly and most personal and intimate spaces related to sexuality and reproduction free from discrimination, coercion and violence. As opposed to an instrumentality that might get associated with the process of engaging men and boys, UNFPA will strive to support an organic bottom-up process of dismantling rigid gender norms, in demonstrating how these norms affect boys and men as much as they impede the progress of girls and women. Acknowledging that the human rights and sexual and reproductive health needs of adolescents and youth have been largely ignored and neglected. We will continue to promote girls' rights, agency and empowerment while enabling boys and young men to access information, education and services related to their sexual and reproductive health, recognizing their own needs and demands. UNFPA will continue to engage with adolescents and young women and men as key stakeholders in redefining social norms and challenging gender stereotypes and inequality to drive the change that is lasting, transformative and sustainable for the future generations to come. I thank you all, and we will strongly advocate for men engaged and boy engaged. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frederica. We know we can count on you and the support of UNFPA as we take this agenda forward. I would now like to call upon the global co-chairs of the Men Engaged Network, Gary Barker and Dean Peacock, to give their closing observations on the second Men Engaged Global Symposium. Gary and Dean.
We're going to do that Oscar thing with both of us standing side by side here. I'm not sure which of those is working. I wanted to start with a quick story from the Rio Symposium 2009. How many were at the Rio Symposium, if I may get folks to? Cool. I'm glad we didn't scare you off. You came here too. As we were walking out, this kind of the parallel to this session, walking out, there's a colleague from a woman colleague from a women's rights organization that took the call to action, and I overheard her saying, and she was tossing the call to action to the floor of saying, they just talk too much about men and their vulnerabilities. They're making men into the new victims. And 45 seconds later, just sort of turning my head, there was one of our colleagues who represents an activist group working with men and boys for gender justice, who was doing the same thing, throwing the call to action to the floor, saying they spent all the time talking about how we're accountable to women's rights. They didn't talk enough about men's vulnerabilities. And I thought, that's the challenge. We knew this wasn't going to be easy, to find the common cause that our sisters who started this work, on whose paths we follow, would trust enough that men could come in and be part of the gender justice struggle. We know that is not easy, to acknowledge that we could be part of that we can find a voice together with you. And it's difficult for men to come in and to be quiet, to listen, to follow the leads of others. I don't think we solved it. It's, to me, a bit like, living in a partnership or a relationship. You solve it every single day. There's no moment you say, wow, our relationship works forever and ever. It is a daily thing. But I do feel, or I want to believe, in these last few days that we've gotten a little closer to finding that common circle in the Venn diagram. And if you walk out today and throw the call to action to the floor, at least do it behind our backs. All right? There were too many things to try to sum up, but there was a couple of phrases that stuck in my head that I want to leave you with. One, I really liked SASA's slogan that I think they say, we work with men and women simultaneously and intensely. And I thought there was a resonance in there of what we want to do with this call here, is to say we must work with gender justice and social justice simultaneously and intensely. I was also profoundly moved by the individual stories told here, the acts of collective resistance and individual resistance told through theater, individual stories of overcoming oppression, finding common humanity that I think we heard every single day. And I think, if anything, as we look at the struggles, to be mindful of those. And they certainly are those that show us that there is a little bit of chipping away at patriarchy kind of every time someone takes an individual act of resistance. And I think there's no more suitable place, when our colleagues proposed India as the place to do this, than Gandhi's birthplace, to think of the power of that nonviolent resistance. The part that I miss and think the volume needs to be turned up more on was what Kumi Naidu started in The Curtain Raiser on Monday. And I'm not sure if I get the quote completely right, but he basically said, if we do nothing about climate change, we'll resolve gender equality. Because in 50 years there will be no humans left to be struggling about gender equality. And I think we all had a deep, painful nod and laugh about that, at the same time of looking how desperate we need to be to move ahead collectively on that. And as I saw Lori Heisey presenting her ecological model, or the ecological model that she has pioneered, and others that all of us have tried, many of us have tried to put to work, I also thought we needed to remember to put the ecology, that whole planetary thing, back into the ecological model. And to make visible here, as we've made the daily costs in the lives of women of patriarchy visible, that we're also making visible the planetary burden of patriarchy. As a final note, I also want to resonate and look just in this room of how much diversity there is, of the number of countries. We repeated that. But I do want to take a second to ask you all to look in the room just about the number of voices, the diversity of age and sex and race and et cetera, et cetera. Just take a moment to look around in this room. It is pretty exciting when you look at it from up here. And that's what I take from this. I really hope that as we walk out, holding our plans of action in our hand, not letting them fall to the floor, that it's that common humanity and that common cause that we take ahead. Thank you all.
Thanks, Gary. I'd like to encourage everyone here to give yourselves a huge round of applause for the incredible work you've done here and in your organizations and the spaces back home. You know, we sat at a meeting at the CSW last year in 2013 and deliberated as to where we should convene the Global Symposium. And very quickly we decided it should be India. Abhijit made the case, and we really agreed, that in the wake of the incredible response in December 2012 and January, thousands of people out on the streets here in Delhi demanding justice for the young woman who was raped and murdered, that it made sense to hold this symposium here in Delhi. And I think we felt that inspiration from our colleagues from across South Asia as they have discussed with the deep intellectual tradition that is part of this region, the complexities of this work. So we've drawn inspiration, I think, for the last 2 years from the men and women who took to the streets. But of course, India has offered a broader inspiration that I think is relevant for us in this moment. As Gary mentioned, history of civil disobedience, the successful liberation of India from colonial rule, deep injustice in 1949. And of course, that lit a spark. Gandhi's message of civil disobedience was picked up in the civil rights movement in the United States. It was picked up across Africa in the liberation struggles of the 60s, and ultimately led to emancipation across the continent and across the developing world. So we owe a deep debt of gratitude for the strategies and commitment and liberation struggles that have come out of this region. The commitment that came at that time, I think, mirrors the kind of commitment we need to make. Our work is in many ways no less ambitious. The struggle then was for civil rights, national liberation. Our struggle is for gender equality, women's rights, and social justice. And I think we will leave this place with a deep commitment, stronger sense of connection to each other, and hopefully a deeper, richer toolkit to take that work forward. I think the work ahead of us is to strengthen our relationships with women's rights organizations and other social justice movements so that we can do the difficult work at the community level and in the spaces of our UN colleagues to demand that our governments implement their commitments and obligations to gender equality. I think we spent the last decade and perhaps 2 decades building a fantastic human rights architecture with commitments to gender equality. And I think now is the time for us to say we insist that these commitments and declarations are in fact implemented. So I want to hope that we leave here full of that inspiration and commitment. And before I stop, what I'd like to do is just to shift gears to thank some of the people who have been involved in this. I don't know, Gary, if you want to start with the thank yous, or if you'd like me to. Go ahead. Go for it. So I want to start, we're going to share the appreciations, but I want to start by thanking some of the donors who have made this possible. Some of the key donors who have funded the work and the symposium are here in the room. The Swedish government, CEDA, have provided us with foundational support for many, many years. And we have representatives from CEDA here to whom we are enormously grateful. So Lotta, Carolina, thank you. The Norwegian government, NORAD, also provided foundational support for the symposium that allowed us then to go out to other donors and rustle up the money we needed to make this possible. The Oak Foundation, similarly, Anastasia and Blaine are here, and we are hugely appreciative for the funding that you have provided. And USAID has been a long-standing supporter. We have colleagues from USAID here. So I'd like us to thank them for their commitment to this work and this symposium. I'd like to, of course, thank the hosts, the Center for Health and Social Justice. I know we will all do that, but I wanted to add my voice of thanks. Abhijit, Jay Shodra, and all of the staff from the Center for Health and Social Justice who have worked tirelessly to make this happen. We owe an enormous debt of gratitude to you, so thank you. Also wanted to thank our UN partners, UN Women, UNFPA, represented here in the front row. And we know that UN Women and UNFPA have had to justify in certain moments the support that they have provided, and we're enormously grateful for your resolute support over many, many countries. So thank you very much. And then lastly, I'd like to thank Andrew Levac and Jay Shodra, who have chaired the program committee, the many panels that you participated in and witnessed, with thanks to the hard work of, and the vision really, of Andrew and Jay Shodra, who coordinated and made sure that all of these panels happened.
A couple of more thanks. We want to thank Yoni van der Sand. Yoni, are you here? And Osvaldo Montoya, our co-chairs of MinEngage. We'd also like to thank the entire MinEngage International Steering Committee for all the work and planning put into this. And in talking about our donors, we mentioned CETA. I do want to take just one moment to thank Paul Dover, colleague at CETA, who also lent his voice to this. He passed away a few months ago. He is sorely missed, and he was an important voice in driving this ahead. I would like to ask us to applaud in his name too. And I would also like to take this moment to thank all the colleagues from Sankey, and in particular my co-chair, Dean Peacock. And just one self-serving moment, and to thank the whole Promundo team who was with us throughout this whole time as well. Thanks.
Gary has been co-chair of the MinEngage Alliance since its very beginning, and I think we owe Gary an enormous debt of gratitude as well for all his vision and hard work.
Thank you, Dean and Gary, for your thanks and for the kind of renewed commitment to taking this work forward. I'd now like to call upon Dr. Sanjay Srivastav on behalf of the India Organizing Committee.
That's a big move, because historically we always thought of masculinity and gender and sexuality in biological terms. When you think in terms of cultures, then the important thing we also think about is that cultures can change. And that's what this last 3-4 days have been about. Secondly, we also talked about histories, multiple histories. So if there are multiple histories, then we can also imagine alternative futures. That's the other thing that I heard lots of papers when I went to them. We talk again about power that is gender, and that's really significant to think about gender and masculinity and relationships in terms of power, and that how do we address different kinds of power relationships. We also then talked about different sites. So one, we talked about different themes. I think we also, and this is where I think we linked up with each other, because there are different sites where masculinity and gender relations are produced. The people who talked about schools, legality in the law, the media, the state, bureaucracies, military apparatuses, policy mechanisms, youth groups, etc., etc. And I think this is what linked different people, because we're not omnipotent people. There are limits to how much one person can know and research and explore and talk about. And I think what I found that different people were talking to each other about their sites of work. And I think that's where both personal friendships and the larger intellectual framework, the framework of activism analysis, it seems to me, that this group was brought to in a relationship with each other through the different kinds of sites that everyone works in different kinds of areas. And the linkages were thinking about how for example, in our case, masculine identities are produced at different sites. And you could see people talking about different kinds of sites that each of us work in. How do men become men? How do women become women at these particular sites? And then as a next step, what are these other kinds of identities that are then seen as aberrant, because they're not part of what we see as normative masculinity? So that was I think that's how our projects are linked. That's how our projects are collective, because our contexts are linked. And these are linkages which, for me, were the broadening of horizons. These are linkages that I think engender different kinds of friendships, both personal and, of course, in terms of our work over the last 4 days. Okay, let me begin now by doing some formal thank yous. I want to, if you want to, I'll mention these groups, and if you want to stand up, wave, or shout out something appropriate in the language that you're comfortable in, please feel free to do so. I want to start off by thanking the group of volunteers and the backroom people who make sure that your cups of coffee, your photocopying, your lost material. Wonderful. If any of you are here, you want to stand up, please do so. Please wave. All the volunteers, all those people wearing those lovely waistcoats. Thank you. Wonderful. I want to thank, as I call out these groupings, again, I say if you want to stand up, please wave or say something, in a language that you're familiar with, and in language and a vocabulary that's acceptable to all of us. Okay, committees. I want to thank the Global Advisory Committee for the entire conference. Thank you. I would like to thank the Executive Committee. I would like to thank the International Planning Committee for the symposium. I would like to thank that committee that made large numbers of people very happy, and perhaps even larger numbers of people quite unhappy, the Abstracts Review Committee. Thank you very much. I want to thank the South Asia Steering Committee who contributed. I would like to thank the Program Subcommittee who contributed. My fellow co-conspirators, the India. I would like to thank my fellow members of the India Organizing Committee who met off and on. Thank you. Well done. I would like to thank that subcommittee that made sure that you danced, stamped your feet, applauded, and sang along, the Cultural Subcommittee. Thank you very much. Thank you. All this is wonderful. All this touchy-feely stuff is wonderful, but you need money to be warm and friendly to each other. I would like to thank ActionAid. I would like to thank the American Center. I would like to thank AJWS, Ford Foundation, MacArthur Foundation, Packard, Swiss Aid, UK Aid, and UNDP. Thank you very much. Thank you. As you know, the selfie is all the rage. It's also now time to do a UE. Thanks to all of you. You were wonderful. Thank you very much. Maybe then meet again in the spirit of learning, collaboration, collegiality, and friendship towards meeting the ends of social justice. The drum that inaugurated the symposium, announcing the search for change, I can still hear them. And I'm sure so can all of you. Thank you, goodbye, and safe journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sanjay, for those closing remarks. There's a final souvenir, a take-home from this conference. Some of you have received it. It's a wall calendar that has a few visuals from this conference. If anyone has it, can stand up and wave that others can see what it looks like? Good. So if anyone doesn't have it and you would like to have it, please contact the desk right in front and take home some of these memories. I just have one little announcement. All the friends who are using the headphones, do not carry it home in your bag. Right, so with these words, we would like to close the official plenary. A very big thanks to our supporters, colleagues, well-wishers, and comrades on the days. Let's give them all a big hand. Abhijit. Okay, the face that launched 1,000 participants, Satish. Woo! Okay, so these are all the faces that launched 1,000 passports and participants. Right. So we're done. That was the closing plenary. And so the official programs of the symposium are now declared closed. But, oh, there's supposed to be a final photograph, please. The photo op. Jaya?